Hello, recappers. Today's movie starts with Craig Daniels, an auto mechanic, spending time with his family one evening when he opens his wallet. His chest tightens. There's barely any money, bills are piling up, and the weight of responsibility presses down on him. He says nothing to his wife, but the worry stays with him into the next morning. As he leaves for work, a piece of paper pinned to his apartment door catches his eye. An eviction notice. His home, his family's shelter, is at risk. He forces himself onward and heads to the garage. The day begins, as usual, with Craig wiping sweat and grease from his hands. Soon, a coworker tells him that Doug, his boss, wants to see him. Moments later, Craig walks out jobless. The news hits like a hammer. Defeated, he wanders the streets and calls his wife to say he'll be late, claiming he's meeting a friend for drinks. In truth, he just can't face going home. At a bar, Craig sat at the counter, trying to drown his worries. A hand grabbed him from behind. Startled, he turned to see Vince, an old friend he hadn't seen in 5 years. Vince laughed, saying he'd only been joking. He insisted on paying for Craig's drinks, but Craig wanted to leave. "It's been 5 years. I'm not letting you run off now," Vince grinned. They sat together. Vince noticed Craig's tension. Craig shared that he had a wife and a 15-month-old son, Keenan, showing Vince a picture. Vince's face lit up, but Craig admitted life wasn't easy. He'd just lost his job and needed $4.500 to cover his problems. Vince shook his head. "I don't have that kind of money. Once, I broke a man's arm for $80. Imagine doing something like that." Excusing himself for the restroom, Craig noticed a strange man but ignored him. Returning, he found Vince with a wealthy couple, Violet and Colin. Colin explained it was Violet's birthday. A $300 bottle of wine arrived, paid without hesitation. The group shared stories and played small bets. First, dares involved drinking contests, then escalating to provoking a drunk girl. Craig won some, Vince won others. Colin began using drugs openly. Craig tried to dissuade him. When the bartender reminded him drugs weren't allowed, Colin slipped her money. Vince suggested heading to another club. Craig resisted, but the two men persuaded him to stay. At the next club, Colin dared them to slap a girl. Craig refused, but Vince rushed off and earned the money, chaos erupting. Craig had enough. As he prepared to leave, a guard approached. Colin offered $500 if Craig punched him. Hesitant, Craig swung, only to be knocked out cold. When he woke, he was in unfamiliar surroundings, pockets full of cash. Vince and Colin explained they had brought him to their home to avoid police trouble. Craig, still dazed, wanted to leave, but was offered medicine for his injuries. Violet tended to him gently, taking a photo to send later. Meanwhile, Colin showed Vince something mysterious, impressing him. On the rooftop, Vince urinated on Craig's shoes. Furious, Craig confronted him, but Vince whispered a darker plan. Rob Colin and Violet, claiming a safe full of cash was unlocked. Craig refused, warning it was too dangerous. Vince insisted, saying Colin wouldn't call the police because of his drugs. Torn between fear and desperation, Craig reluctantly agreed. Vince would handle Colin. Craig, Violet. They moved to the safe. Craig opened it, bundles of cash inside. Then he noticed a framed martial arts award for Colin. Before Vince could react, Colin disarmed him, and Violet drew a gun. The tables had turned. Colin laughed, calm, explaining the money was meant for them if they wanted to play a game. Vince's eyes lit up. The first dare. Hold your breath the longest for $500. Craig prepared. Then his phone rang. His wife, who had spoken to the man he had lied about meeting. She wasn't angry and urged him to come home. He promised he would, in 45 minutes. Colin handed Craig $200, insisting he hang up. Vince, furious, punched Craig in the stomach during the breath-holding dare, causing him to lose. Colin reminded them there were no rules. Next, Colin dared them to throw dirt on his neighbor's house for money. Craig completed it first, winning. The final dare required him to spend intimate time with Violet. Success meant $4.500, enough to cover his rent and lift the crushing weight of his troubles. Craig accepted and won the money, but Vince was furious. He felt humiliated, betrayed, and angry at the unfairness of the game. Guilt also consumed Craig, who regretted what he had done to his wife. Shaken, he left the game, deciding that the money he had was enough to buy time before facing eviction. Violet, however, looked hurt when Craig walked out. She had started to develop feelings for him, and without his presence, the game lost its purpose. It had been designed to entertain her, and now she withdrew into silence. Vince, desperate to keep playing, offered to do anything Colin asked. Colin smiled and gave him a shocking dare: cut off his own pinky finger for $25,000. Vince hesitated but seemed ready to accept when, suddenly, Craig returned. Craig admitted that the $4,500 wasn't enough. He needed more money. He offered to do the dare himself for a smaller amount. The two friends went back and forth, lowering their offers until Craig agreed to cut off his pinky for $15,000. Vince, furious but powerless, watched as Craig sliced off his finger and won again. The next challenge was even more disturbing. Colin brought out a cooked dead dog. The animal had died while trying to eat Craig's severed finger. The dare was simple. Whoever finished eating first would win $50,000. Both men struggled through the sickening task and finished at the same time. To break the tie, Colin said the winner would be whoever ate Craig's finger. Craig rushed forward, grabbed his severed pinky and swallowed it down before Vince could react. He won again. Vince exploded with rage and attacked Craig, beating him brutally. Colin dragged Vince outside to calm him down, but instead of calming him, Colin whispered in Vince's ear, pouring fuel on the fire. He told Vince that Craig had always leaned on him for support, and now Craig was repaying him with betrayal. Colin tempted Vince with one final offer: kill Craig and win the rest of the $250,000. At first, Vince agreed, lured by greed. But when he stood face to face with his friend, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He told Craig they should leave together and forget everything before he could act on it. Craig, in a desperate moment, shot Vince dead. Colin calmly called Craig a taxi. Before Craig left, Colin handed Violet her share of the money. The couple had been betting all along on which friend would kill the other. Colin had chosen Vince, while Violet had chosen Craig. Craig, shaken and bleeding, took the money and returned home. When he stepped inside, his young son Keenan ran into his arms. Craig held him tightly, tears in his eyes. But as the light flicked on, his wife appeared, staring at him. She looked at his blood-covered body and at the piles of money scattered across the floor. The room was silent, heavy with questions that Craig couldn't answer. And that's how our story ends. What did you think about the ending? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next breakdown.